Okay, so now we get to another controversial aspect of this war, which was the use of what we don't hear about as much is the actual air war itself, but more so the actual use of an atomic bomb. Okay, so after that major Operation Bagration, and what we mentioned, that major 3 million Soviet troop onslaught. Um, Hitler commits suicide, and then on May 7th, 1945, General Alfred Jodl signed the unconditional surrender of German forces. But the war was not over. Germany surrendered. Japan was still fighting with the war of the Allies in the Pacific. And since the Battle of Midway, it mentions that they were able to, the U.S. was steadily getting, an upper hand. And the Japanese war industry was not able to keep up. United States was able to keep up much better than what was happening with for the Japanese. Now, what ended up ensuing, not just on the Japanese but also the Germans, was a use of an air war in a way that we don't talk about now. So, okay, you'll notice when we have this war, actually for the last several, in my lifetime, the United States will talk about, or Western countries will talk about bombing targeted areas. And then when civilians get killed, they rather deny that civilians got killed or put the blame on the insurgents or the enemy targets or claim that it's propaganda. But it's unheard of to say, oh yeah, so what? Collateral damage is the term used. There's usually this kind of remark, whether sincere or not sincere, of we regret that there's collateral damage or civilian casualties, but, and then you go from there. In other words, that's not our target. Our target is the bad guys, and unfortunately, sometimes innocent people get killed. This is the narrative that we hear now. In World War II, especially by the end of this, there was no such thing as civilian and soldier. There was just enemy. There was just a nation to be defeated and a nation to win. Okay, and so civilians were targeted as much as soldiers. This is how it was. This was total war. Okay, and this is going to go all the way through up into the Korean War. Okay, and I just want to make it clear that the Allied side did this. This was even before the nuclear bomb. I mean, look here in your text. It says that German planes had bombed almost every major industrial city in Britain, killing 43,000 non-combatants. It's extreme, right? Okay. And then the other hand, Germany was getting bombed like crazy. It says more than 500,000 German civilians died in Allied bombing attacks. 20% of those were children. Okay. They don't talk about it in here, but Dresden, and that's if you've read the novel by Kurt Vonnegut, the late author who wrote Slaughterhouse-Five. He was a prisoner of war in World War II by the Germans, and he also happened to be in that area of Dresden when it was the Allied forces were carpet bombing hospitals, schools, anything that walked and breathed. They just carpet bombed. So basically, in 4 raids between basically in 1945, a little over 700 heavy bombers of the British Royal Air Force, over 500 United States Army Air Forces dropped almost 4,000 tons of high explosive bombs on the city. Okay, and so this is the kind of warfare that was taking place, and then Japan end up suffering as well. Now they were aggressive. You notice that I've talked about Japanese doing really horrific things in the war. but the Japanese also took some serious damage as well, civilian-wise. As it mentions in the textbook, American bombs using this firestorm killed 85,000 residents of Tokyo. 85,000 residents. Look at the size of Santa Cruz County right now in California. Basically destroying, that would be like destroying like Santa Cruz, the city. Okay? Everybody in it. Over the next 5 months, it mentions bombers hit 66 Japanese cities. They burned 180 square miles and killed approximately 330,000 Japanese. Okay? And in the middle of that, we return to this topic of the Manhattan Project, or the secret Anglo-American project to construct an atom bomb. And you had some people like the likes of Einstein in this. There was a fear of many people that Hitler would get this and that he would use it. And so it was made. But then when people started having discussions about whether or not to use this bomb, it became less straightforward and more controversial. And I just want to say now, this textbook doesn't really do a good job of kind of discussing also some of the controversy around this decision-making process. That I'm not going to give you any conclusions on. I just want to point out that the standard argument that's been made for a long time to justify using the atom bomb is that Truman, as it says in the textbook, it says here, Truman's perspective, however, continuing the war with or without an invasion of Japan meant continuing to put Allied soldiers in harm's way. The bomb promised to end the war quickly and bring Allied servicemen home. That's the standard narrative, and that has a certain resonance that's been justified. And I've heard many, many older folks from World War II era talk when I worked in coffee shops say just that and get angered when America takes such a strong criticism for this, when they said, it wasn't like we started this war, the Japanese did this, and look how bad they were, and this might have been a terrible thing, but it was what was needed to end the war. Well, historians now are looking at many documents and analyzing this, and there appears to be a strong argument on another side of this debate that this was a message indirectly sent at the Soviet Union, who we knew was going to be our enemy at the end, and to basically show what America was capable of, and that this was more or less a kind of open experiment as opposed to an actual necessity to win the war. Now, that is very damning of our political leader, because if that's the case, that's really hard to really just forgive if it's just something that it was done that way. What I saw, which convinced me, is that Truman has contradicted his statements about the war many times, and there is a certain kind of lack of clarity as to the real intent, at the very least, of using this bomb. Okay, so I just kind of want to point that out. I'm not really gonna shove a particular point of view, because I really don't have enough solid evidence to really kind of say one thing or the other, but I think you should know that that is up for debate. And this textbook should have at least addressed that there is a debate on that. Okay, basically, I mean, because let's think about this. We think of terrorism as when you directly target civilians. I mean, I'm going to be controversial, but kind of like, the bombing of Dresden, or this case, this is an entire population that's being bombed. I mean, if terrorism is defined as targeting a civilian population for using violence with a political objective and attacking soft targets or civilians, then this is a very damning, if that's our definition we're using, and we're looking at what's happening here, that's very damning. Of course, we have the entire context of the war itself, right? And, what does it say here? 140,000 died by the end of 1945. Another 60,000 dying in the next 5 years. And we're talking about grotesque death. The people who died instantly were the lucky ones. The people who had their skins melted off while they were still alive, or their eyeballs melt from their head, that's different. That had to slowly die, or died of the radiation sickness. Okay? I mean, this is one of the worst advances in scientific technology that humans could do on each other. And the role of this, and to the fact that even several, like later, shortly after, it was used again on Nagasaki. We forget about that. So, August 6th, we have Enola Gay, named after the pilot's mother, dropping this bomb on a lot of people's mothers in Japan. And then you have American forces drop an atom bomb on the city of Nagasaki and killing 70,000 people outright. And then another 70,000 dying over the next 5 years. Okay? That is tremendous. And so then it says August 10th, Emperor Hirohito basically made the surrender. Okay? So yes, did it help us win the war? Well, I think no matter what, you can't debate that. But it really opens up a tricky question. And especially now when the U.S. and the West punishes places like Iran for even wanting to talk about nuclear energy. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the Cold War era. To this day, the only country in the world that's ever used nuclear bombs is the United States. And the United States still has all their nuclear bombs and tells other nations that they're not allowed to have them. I don't want other nations having nuclear bombs. But at the same time, there is a little bit of irony of the one country who's actually used them and has a lot of them tells the rest of the world that they're evil when they try to use them, or that we can't trust other nations with nuclear bombs, but we can trust ourselves when we've already used them and we know what their results will be if we ever do use them again. It will kill huge parts of the civilian population. So anyways, there's no way to escape the controversy of that, and the debates will rage, and I really hope in our lifetime that we never see another one dropped again to even open up this debate further. And I will end there, and we'll move on to the next little summations of the war before we move on to the next chapter.